Hello again. I'm going to talk you through the equipment I use, why I've chosen to use this particular equipment and how it actually helps me with the photography and the kind of photography I do. It's become pretty mandatory now for people on YouTube to explain or justify themselves in particular ways, and one of those is showing the equipment that they actually use. I'll start with the camera. Since 2016 I've been using Sony's. This is the A7 Mark IV. I started in 2016 with the A7 Mark II, A7R2, this is A7R4. It's significantly better than the A7R2. It's not significantly better than the A7R3 that I had. The extra megapixels are handy, the deeper grip is nice, the ergonomics of the camera have been improved. But other than that, I could probably do the same job with an A7R3 and have saved myself some money. But anyway, that's the way it is, and it's happened now. I've bought it. I'm very pleased with it. It's got good battery life, the image quality is stunning, the dynamic range is stunning, and it's a nice compact little piece of kit to have with you. And the improved weather sealing on this particular model actually has proven itself in the last week, because when I was in the Lake District it was getting absolutely pissed on by the rain that kept coming through while we were there. On the camera I also have a Really Right Stuff L bracket. I like that because when I mount it on the tripod I can actually have it in portrait or landscape mode with the centre of the camera over the centre of the tripod in both cases, which means if I need to do a panoramic image it's already in the correct place. If I use the ball head sideways, tipped sideways on the tripod head, it's going to actually cause the camera to swing round in an arc rather than pivoting about the centre of the sensor, which is why I have the L bracket on the camera. Also it acts as a degree of protection, because when I put it down on rough surfaces like rocks and things like that, it's actually going to protect the bottom of the camera from damage, which is, I look after my equipment quite a lot. I value it, I don't like to see any harm come to it, so that's actually a plus side from my point of view. On the moment, in terms of lenses, I've got the Sony G Master 24-70 2.8 on here. I don't really need 2.8, and I wish they made a f4 in the G Master range, but they don't, so I'm stuck with a heavy, large 2.8, even though I hardly ever use it at 2.8. It's a stunning lens, a zoom lens that competes with most primes in the range. Therefore, it's a nice piece of kit. I've had this particular one since 2016 and I've no signs of getting rid of it. You might notice on the front it's got a K's lens cap. I've got the K's filter, a magnetic filter system on all my lenses, and I find it really convenient because everything, including the filters, just snap into place and I can stack the filters one on top of the other as appropriate. So that's the main workhorse. This does most of what I do. I 6 months ago bought this Sony G Master 16-35 2.8 lens. Again, this is a stunning lens. It really produces incredible image quality, sharpness and also contrast. And for zoom lenses, Sony really have excelled in what they're making nowadays, I believe. Although I'm not a Sony fanboy, I just appreciate lenses that work properly. The only advantage this really gives me over the 24-70 is this bit from 16 to 24. Consequently, this tends to stay in the bag a lot of the time, because it's not unless I want some really wide and have a very close foreground that I'll use this lens. So it gets used about 1 in 4 times when I'm out shooting. The third lens in the sequence of lenses, and the last lens that I actually have, is the massive, great big heavy Sony 100-400 G Master lens. Again, like the other two lenses, it has the K's magnetic filter system on. This is a very sharp lens. It doesn't do justice to the title zoom because it actually competes with quite a few primes I've used in the past. It's stabilised, although mounted on a tripod I hardly ever use it. I also have the 2x converter, which I won't bore you with by showing you, which occasionally I put on to get a bit of extra reach. So all in all, 3 lenses. They're absolutely stunning lenses. The next part of the kit is the filter system that I use. I used to have Lee big stoppers, little stoppers, circular polarizers. I found the clutter of having the holder on the adapter on the lenses and having all the lenses with different sized adapters to make the filter holder fit. At Shure, I didn't like it. It was a nuisance, cumbersome, takes space up. This system is so compact. In this little leather pouch I've got 4 filters, the only ones I really need. You'll often see this actually clipped to my lapel because it's convenient just to be able to switch the filters in and out with them close by. In here I've got a 10, an 8 and a 6 stop ND filter, or filters. I also have the circular polarizer. All of these filters stack one on top of the other so I can have any combination I want. I don't need or want to use graduated filters. I've had them in the past, they end up staying in the box because so few of the scenes I actually shoot have got anything other than mountains in them or irregular horizons, and because graduated filters are linear, or not necessarily linear, but it's a line across that it's trying to either be very wide and very graduated over or quite harsh as a graduation. Most of what I shoot doesn't suit that, so having the filter there means that I'm having to post-process the filter's effect from the top of hills in the distance, and if I'm going to post-process I might as well do it properly. So I actually post-process images that don't have graduation on. I might shoot multiple images if the dynamic range is really very high, but blend them together in Lightroom or Photoshop, but most of the time the dynamic range of the Sony is enough that I can get away with 1 image, sometimes 2 if it's really extreme. But apart from that, I prefer to work in Lightroom, and Lightroom gives me the ability to recover all the detail I want. As long as I haven't blown the highlights out, I'm good to go. So Lightroom works for me, and I enjoy the process of working with Lightroom. I use Photoshop as well, partly because it's part of the bundle, the photographer's bundle that I'm actually paying into with Adobe, and also it gives me finer control when I actually need to do some really quite awkward and tricky edits. So those are the cameras, lenses and filters that I use. Next on the agenda is this little baby. This is the DJI Mavic Mini, and when we say mini, we mean mini. It is tiny. It only weighs 249 grams. It has a 12 megapixel camera, which I've already produced images and printed them out at A2 from this, and I've been blown away by the image quality. The dynamic range isn't perfect because it's a small sensor, but I can get around that because I can take 2 images at different exposures and then exposure blend them together later. So I can live with what this does, and because it's so tiny, it's so easy to have with you. The previous drones I've had, and the last one prior to this was the DJI Mavic Pro 2, which had the Hasselblad camera on the front, produced stunning images, but I had to think about taking it with me because it just took up space. It wouldn't fit in my camera case. It was always a second case with the actual drone in, and also the smart controller, which incidentally is basically £1,800 for that pair, whereas this all in was £350. So I can live with the fact that this is considerably cheaper given what it does, and it's so transportable. I actually do take it with me. It's part of the kit that goes in my camera bag. So this little baby goes to a lot of places. It flies for roughly 30 minutes. It's excellent. I've got no complaints with it. Also, being 249 grams, you don't need to register it with the CAA here in the UK. Although I have, and I've also passed the drone operator's test, so I've registered as a drone operator, and this is registered actually as my drone with the CAA. So you have to be responsible with drones. There's too many idiots out there just playing with them as toys and annoying people, and I'm not one of those. I want to actually use it as a tool for photography. This is my eye in the sky. I can get this to places that I can't get my camera to, so I get shots other people can't easily get without using a drone. This suits me. There's quite a few instances of where a tree in the foreground or a bush in the foreground, you just can't get high enough to get over to get the picture you want, and it just clutters the image. So I can just put this up slightly higher and get a nice image without the foreground clutter that would spoil it otherwise. So that's the drone. The next part of the equipment is this monster of a tripod. This thing is huge. It weighs 3 kilos, which goes a bit against the grain for me to have a tripod this heavy. My previous tripod was a really right stuff TVS 24, I think it was called, or TVC 24, which was incredibly sturdy, but it didn't go high enough. This tripod, the platform head, actually with all 3 leg sections extended, can go right up to approximately 7 foot. And that's without the centre column that adds another 2 foot of extension if I want to go higher than that. It's absolutely rock solid. It's made by a company, Chinese I believe company called Sirui, S-I-R-U-I. It's absolutely rock solid. It does not move under any conditions. It's 3 kilos, so it's a bit heavier than I'm used to at 1.5 kilos with the previous tripod. But there are 2 advantages in it. It is rock solid, and it goes higher, and it's a lot cheaper. I'm not particularly price sensitive. I like to buy things that actually do the job and do the job well. This is approximately half the price of Really Right Stuff setup. Really Right Stuff ball head, BH40 ball head is about $600, 500 odd pounds. This Sirui ball head, which is absolutely stunning, it really is a solid ball head, is £159 off Amazon where I bought it. The tripod legs are £500 off Amazon. I bought this off eBay, but I think they're selling for about £500 this set of tripod legs. So £650, approximately half the price of Really Right Stuff's equipment. I also have these metal spike feet on here because I find with the resolution of the camera, rubber feet can just slightly move, even if they're on a solid surface. The slight amount of movement in the rubber under certain conditions can actually show up as movement in the image, especially if I've got a long lens on. So this little beast gets carried everywhere, and much as it's heavy, that's its downside. I do appreciate how solid it is, and I'm actually quite prepared to lose the advantage of weight for the benefit of how solid it is. So that's the tripod. My bag, not of any interest, just a backpack, get all these bits and pieces in. I'm not a Sony fanboy, I'd like to stress. I've had Canon, I've had Nikon over the years. In fact, when I was working professionally, I was using Nikon and Canon mainly. And I did that for several years, but now I'm doing it more out of interest as a hobby. Landscape photography is my interest. The Sony gives me what I want. I've got good resolution, I've got some clever things in here that some other camera manufacturers don't have. Animal eye autofocus and tracking, human eye autofocus and tracking. Not so relevant for me because there aren't many eyes in the landscape, but if I do anything with people or with animals, then that really is quite sensational to watch it working. It just works exactly as you want it to. And as I say, I'm not a fanboy. I like this equipment because it does what I want it to do. If somebody comes out with something in a year or so's time, or even next week, which actually does it better, I'll consider moving to that. I'm not holding sort of any candle up for Sony. I just appreciate that at the moment they seem to be taking the world a bit by storm with some of the clever things they're doing with their cameras, and you just can't argue with that. The rest of the camera manufacturing marketplace are actually playing catch up. I can speak from experience as well, because over the last 2 years, as well as this camera, I've actually tried a Nikon Z7. I bought one, I bought 3 lenses. I've had a Panasonic S1R with the 24-105 lens on. Nice camera, beautiful image quality, big, heavy, like an SLR itself actually. It's quite a beast. I've had a Fujifilm GFX 50R, which again was huge. Image quality, not better than this. I've had 2 Olympus OMD EM1 Mark IIs. I love them. The only reason I don't have one now is because 20 megapixels or thereabouts, maybe 24, I can't remember. The dynamic range just isn't good enough for the sort of photography that I'm doing. It limits me, I can't crop as much as I can, having a huge sense of resolution. And it's a nice camera to have. Even just with the 24-105 lens, you can actually do most things with it. No, it's the 12-100, which equates to 24-200 in 35mm terms. I love the camera, but I just couldn't do without this one. I can't justify keeping multiple cameras at the same time. So I'm stuck with this. I like it, that's fine, it works for me. Anyway, I'll wind that up there. That's pretty much what I've got, what I use it for, and apart from the fact that I've got a computer, PC, I don't use Mac, and 2 monitors so I can run with Lightroom and Photoshop, and I also use Capture One. that's pretty much how I operate. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little brief description. I feel I've sort of taken the ghost out of the cupboard in terms of doing a gear video. Anyway, Happy New Year.